Ryan's office revenge. 10 days after our $1.8 billion merger closed, I got terminated in a glass conference room with a calendar invite titled Quick Sync. No warning, no performance plan, no conversation, just HR, a legal rep I recognized from due diligence, and a severance packet already stapled together like my exit was processed before I even sat down. My name is Patrick Sullivan. I'm 48 years old, and I've been doing M&A finance for 22 years. I've seen enough mergers to know when timing doesn't make sense. And when timing doesn't make sense in a merger, it's usually not an accident. The night before, I had been in the integration war room until after midnight. Monitors everywhere, people talking in acronyms like it was a second language, synergy models, headcount mappings, vendor consolidation. Everything had a cost, a timeline, and a risk rating. I was the senior finance director on the integration team, not some junior analyst. After 22 years, I was the guy who lived inside numbers long enough to notice when one number was trying to hide another. For 4 months, I helped build the model the board used to justify the deal. We mapped duplicative roles, overlapping software, redundant contracts. We built a clean story for investors, disciplined integration, controlled costs, predictable savings. But inside the company after close, the story was different. The pressure doubled overnight. The people at the top wanted the market to see momentum, so everything had to move fast. Fast decisions, fast vendor selection, fast integration partners, fast enough that nobody had time to ask why. This timing couldn't have been worse for my family. Linda, my wife of 20 years, had just started chemotherapy for breast cancer. The insurance coverage was tied to my job, and her treatment schedule meant I'd been juggling work calls with oncology appointments for the past month. Our daughter Sarah was a junior at Northwestern. Our son Michael was starting his senior year at Michigan College. Tuition, medical bills, and a mortgage in suburban Chicago. Losing my job wasn't just inconvenient, it was catastrophic. On the Monday after the closing dinner, my manager Barbara pulled me onto a new work stream. Procurement rationalization, she called it. Her words were casual, but her eyes weren't. Just help us clean up contracts, she said. We need to be tight during integration. That's when I saw the first thing that bothered me. A consulting agreement labeled transformation support. $1.5 million spend, approved fast, scope so vague you could drive a truck through it. The firm had almost zero track record in our specific space. At first, I assumed it was normal merger chaos. Big deals attract consultants like blood attracts sharks. But then I looked at the approval chain. It wasn't the vendor choice that shocked me. It was who pushed it through. Aaron Hoffman, our new integration lead, brought in right before close. The guy leadership called a closer. He had that polished confidence that makes people stop asking questions, and he was 15 years younger than me with half the experience but twice the ambition. Right under the contract signature was a partner name from the consulting firm that hit me like a cold flash. Same last name as Aaron's wife. Same hometown on the public bio. Same charity board listed in an old article I found online. It wasn't proof. It wasn't a smoking gun. But it was the kind of connection that if it ever became public would look exactly like what everyone assumes happens after mergers. Friends, favors, and money moving quietly behind the restructuring headlines. So I did what we were trained to do. Not dramatic, not emotional, just process. I opened our integration risk register, created a new entry, and wrote it in the driest language possible. I didn't call anyone corrupt. I didn't accuse anyone of anything. I just logged the contract ID, the vendor name, and the fact that the relationship was publicly discoverable. Then I emailed the updated register to the governance distribution list. Legal, compliance, the integration PMO, and my manager. One boring email, one row in a spreadsheet. That should have been the end of it. Instead, the next morning, Barbara stopped by my desk. She didn't sit down. She didn't even smile. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. We stepped into a small room with a whiteboard. She closed the door behind us. Then she said something that didn't fit the moment, like she was reading a line she hated. "I'm going to be direct," she said. "There are changes coming down." I waited. She looked at the floor for half a second. "It's not about your performance," she added. Then softer, "If anyone asks, you're transitioning out of the integration office." The phrase was too clean. Transitioning out, like I was a file being moved to a different folder. I went back to my desk and tried to work, but my mind kept replaying it. I checked my sent email. The risk register message was there, time-stamped, normal. And that's when I noticed something else. The contract approval date didn't line up with the procurement workflow timestamps. It looked rushed, like pieces had been pushed through before the system caught up. I stared at the screen and felt my stomach go cold. Because there are only two reasons companies move that fast after a merger. Either they're afraid of losing money, or they're afraid of leaving a record. And with Linda's treatment schedule, with tuition payments due in 6 weeks, with a mortgage that depended on my steady paycheck, I couldn't afford to be wrong about what was happening. On Thursday morning, a calendar invite popped up. Quick sync, 15 minutes, no agenda, no context. Just HR and a conference room name. I stood there for a second with my hand on my mouse, staring at that invite like it could explain itself. Then I heard my phone buzz, a text from Barbara. "Please don't say anything in there you can't take back." And in that moment, I understood something I didn't want to understand. They weren't preparing to restructure. They were preparing to control the story. I walked to that conference room anyway. When I opened the door, HR was already seated with legal. The severance packet was already on the table. And before anyone spoke, I saw the date printed in the corner. It was dated the day before I logged that risk. That was when my hands stopped feeling like hands. That was when I realized this wasn't a layoff. This was a reaction. I sat down like I was about to review a quarterly forecast. Sandra from HR smiled first, that practiced, painless smile you see in onboarding videos. The legal rep, Charlie Thompson, didn't smile at all. "Thanks for joining on short notice," Sandra said. "We'll keep this brief." She slid the packet toward me like it was a menu. "Due to integration restructuring, your position has been impacted." Impacted. Not eliminated, not replaced, not redundant. Just impacted, like a weather event. I kept my voice steady, my voice. "Is this performance-related?" "No," she said immediately. "This is not performance-based." I looked at Charlie. He stared at the table. No disagreement, no correction, just silence. They wanted me calm, compliant, quick. I flipped the first page and read the bullets like I was auditing someone else's work. Separation effective today. Severance based on tenure. Return all company property. Sign within a limited window. Non-disparagement. Confidentiality. Release of claims. The language was standard. The timing wasn't. And with Linda's next chemo session scheduled for Friday, with insurance coverage that ended the moment I signed this paper, every word felt like it had teeth. I pointed at the date in the corner. This was prepared yesterday. Sandra didn't blink. "We prepare documents in advance for planning purposes." Planning purposes. I nodded once, slowly, like I accepted that. But in my head, a different sentence formed. They knew I was gone before I finished my work. And the only reason you plan a termination that quickly after close is because you're afraid someone might ask why you waited. I asked, "Who made the decision?" Sandra smiled again, slightly tighter. "It's an organizational decision. That answer always means one thing. It means someone important doesn't want their name in your notes." I didn't argue. I asked for two simple things. One, I needed confirmation in writing that this wasn't for cause. Two, I wanted a copy of my personnel file. Sandra nodded like I'd asked for a receipt. "We can provide employment verification," she said. "Your personnel file request can be submitted." Then she slid a second page forward. "Just sign here acknowledging you received the packet. That's how they get people. They frame the first signature as harmless, a formality, a tiny surrender that makes the next surrender easier." I signed the receipt, not the release. With Linda's treatment depending on my decision, I couldn't afford to rush. Sandra's eyes flicked to his flicked. "Charlie." It was subtle, but I saw it. A quick check. Is he going to be difficult? Charlie finally spoke. "You will need to return all assets immediately. It will assist." When I stepped out, Kevin from IT was already waiting in the hallway with an envelope. He didn't look at me like a colleague. He looked at me like a task. We walked back to my desk in silence. My coworkers kept typing, kept laughing softly, kept doing normal Thursday things because in corporate life, someone else's disaster is background noise. I shut down my laptop. The moment the lid closed, my phone buzzed. A system notification. "Your access has been disabled. Fast. Too fast for a restructuring." They weren't managing headcount. They were cutting the line before it could connect to something. Kevin waited while I placed my badge into the envelope. Then he nodded once and walked away like I wasn't there anymore. I stood at my desk for a second, staring at the screens I could no longer log into, the same screens I'd lived in for months, the same dashboards leadership would still use tomorrow. As I walked out, I passed the merger posters. One team, one future. And I felt something shift inside me. Not panic. Clarity. Because I understood exactly what they were betting on. They were betting I'd be embarrassed, that I'd sign the release fast, that I'd tell myself it's just business, that I'd walk away quietly and let my risk entry die with me. But outside in the parking lot, my phone buzzed again. A text from Barbara. "I'm sorry. Call me later." I stared at it, then typed, "Were you told to warn me?" 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then nothing. My stomach tightened in a way that wasn't fear anymore. And then, as I sat in my car with the engine off, another message popped up from an unknown number. Just a single line. "Check what they told unemployment. They're changing the story." I didn't know it yet, but that sentence was the first crack. Because if they were willing to change the reason for firing me, it meant they were already building a version of events that wasn't true. And when a company starts rewriting the story that early, it's because the real story is worse. I drove home without turning on music. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my mind was working like it always did at work, building a model. Close date, risk log date, packet date, termination date. And one question that wouldn't leave me. If this was just restructuring, why did it feel like evidence was being erased? At home, Linda was resting on the couch after her morning appointment. She looked up when I walked in early. "How was work?" she asked. I sat down next to her and took her hand. "We need to talk." When I explained what happened, her face went through 3 stages. Shock, then anger, then the kind of calculation you see in people who've learned to fight for their lives. "What about my treatment?" she asked. "Cobra coverage kicks in," I said. "We'll manage the premiums, but we both knew the math. My severance would cover 4 months, maybe 5, if we were careful. Her chemo schedule ran 6 months minimum. So what do we do? She asked. I laid the severance packet on our kitchen table and stared at it the way you stare at a diagnosis you don't agree with. The money looked helpful, the language looked standard, but every paragraph had the same message underneath. Sign fast, stay quiet. Let us choose the reason. We don't sign anything yet, I said. Not until we understand why they're so eager for my signature. I didn't open a laptop. I didn't call co-workers. I didn't vent online. I did what I always did when something didn't add up. I built a timeline. Merger close. Monday, risk register entry. Wednesday night, quick sync invite. Thursday morning. Termination. Thursday afternoon. Packet date. Wednesday. 10 days after a $1.8 billion merger closed. They had time to celebrate, time to post photos, time to give speeches, and somehow they also had time to pre-write my exit. That wasn't restructuring. That was precision. I emailed HR that night, short and polite. Thank you for meeting. For clarity, please confirm in writing whether this separation is for cause or part of restructuring. Also, please confirm there are no performance or conduct allegations. I didn't add emotion. I didn't mention the contract. I didn't accuse anyone of anything. Just a yes or no question that forced a record. Then I waited. Then silence. The kind that means someone is deciding what story to tell. The next morning, Sandra responded, "This is not a performance-based termination. Your role is impacted by integration restructuring." I read the sentence 3 times, not because it comforted me, but because it was a pin in the board, a fixed point. I saved it, forwarded it to myself, screenshot, PDF, redundant. It felt paranoid for about 5 seconds. Then my phone rang. It was the state unemployment office. A representative with a neutral voice reading from a screen. "Your former employer responded," she said. "They're indicating separation due to policy violations." My stomach dropped so hard I actually laughed once, quietly, like my body couldn't decide whether to panic or get angry. "What policy?" I asked. "I'm seeing failure to follow direction," she said, "and misuse of confidential information." My hands went cold. Not because I was guilty, but because I finally understood what they were trying to do. They couldn't admit, even indirectly, that I was removed right after logging a governance risk. That kind of story spreads. It invites questions. It invites discovery. It invites the one thing executives hate after a merger, a second narrative. So they were building a different one. In the morning, I wasn't performance-based. In the afternoon, I was a policy violator. 2 stories, same week, same company. That mismatch wasn't an accident. I asked the unemployment rep, "Can you send me what they submitted?" She said she could provide a summary, and she gave me a date and a reference number. Then she added, almost casually, "If you disagree, you can request a hearing." After I hung up, I sat on the edge of my couch and felt something crack inside me. Not courage, not rage, the last bit of trust. I'd given them everything during integration. Late nights, weekends, the kind of effort you only give when you believe the system rewards competence. And now the system was trying to staple misconduct to my name because it was convenient. Linda was in the kitchen making tea when I told her about the unemployment call. She set down her mug harder than necessary. "They're lying," she said. It wasn't a question. "They're creating options," I said. "Different stories for different audiences." "So what do we do?" I looked at my wife, who'd spent the morning getting poison pumped into her veins to save her life, asking me what we do about people trying to poison my reputation to save their careers. "We fight," I said. "But we do it smart." That night I stopped, being the loyal employee in my own head. I called an employment attorney the next morning. Not a billboard guy, a quiet one named Gregory Martinez that my brother-in-law recommended. He listened without interrupting, then asked me one thing. "Do you have anything in writing that contradicts their claim?" I opened my email, read Sandra's line out loud. "This is not a performance-based termination." He was quiet for a beat. Then, "Good. Now we document everything, and we stop guessing." He had me do 4 practical things. All boring, all lethal. 1. Write down the names in the termination room, the exact phrases used, and the time. 2. Save the calendar invite metadata for quick sync. 3. Pull any performance reviews I had ever downloaded legally before termination. 4. Do not contact anyone at the company from company systems, and do not go digging for documents. Your memory plus their records is enough, he said. Let them explain their own systems. He sent a preservation letter to the company, a formal request that they preserve communications and records related to my termination and the stated reason for it. No accusations, just the words that make grown adults in corporate hallways stop smiling. Litigation hold. The day after that, outside counsel emailed my lawyer. The tone was suddenly collaborative. They asked for a call to understand the circumstances. I didn't feel relieved. I felt confirmed because companies don't get collaborative about unemployment disputes unless something else is moving behind the curtain. That evening, Barbara finally called. Her voice sounded careful, like she was speaking from inside a room with microphones. "I'm sorry," she said again. "Did they tell you I violated policy?" I asked. A pause, then quietly, "They're trying to say you mishandled information." "I didn't take anything," I said. "I didn't forward files. I didn't screenshot systems." "I know," she whispered. "That's why I'm calling. Please don't talk to anyone inside. They're looking for something to pin on you." I sat there with the phone pressed to my ear, and my mind replayed the termination meeting. Charlie's silence, the packet date, the speed of the access cut. They weren't looking for truth. They were looking for an excuse. Before we hung up, Barbara said one more thing, almost like she hated herself for saying it. "They're saying your risk register entry created noise right after close." I stared at the wall. So it was about that. She didn't answer directly. She didn't need to. After we hung up, I opened my notebook and wrote one sentence in block letters. "They are changing the story." Then I got a text from a number I hadn't seen in months. Luis Rodriguez, compliance. He'd left the company last quarter, but he still had friends inside. "Can you talk?" he wrote. When I called, he didn't waste time. "Your risk entry is gone," he said. "Gone how?" "Deleted from the register," he said. "The whole row. Not just closed, removed." My throat went tight. "They can do that?" "They can edit," he said. "But deletion leaves traces. Version history, audit trail. Someone tried to clean it." He exhaled once, sharp. "That's not normal." For a second, I couldn't speak. My brain just clicked through the implications. If the risk entry was deleted, it meant someone with access went back in after I was terminated, searched for the line, and removed it as if it never existed. Not to fix the problem, to erase the record that the problem had been raised. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. I thanked Luis and ended the call. Then I opened my email again and looked at Sandra's sentence one more time. This is not a performance-based termination. I had it. I had the contradiction. I had the pattern. And in the middle of that quiet kitchen with a severance packet on my table and a company trying to repaint me as a liability, I realized the truth I'd been avoiding since the glass room. This wasn't about headcount. This was about containment, and if they were willing to delete a governance risk from the register, then whatever was sitting behind that consulting contract wasn't just embarrassing, it was dangerous. I didn't sleep much after Luis's call. Not because I was scared, but because my brain wouldn't stop running the same calculation. If they deleted the risk entry, they weren't trying to win an argument. They were trying to erase a timestamp. And when people start erasing timestamps, it means the next step is usually uglier. They put the blame somewhere else. So I moved like I was still inside the company. Methodical, clean, boring. First, I forwarded Luis's message thread to my lawyer. Not as proof, but as context, a reason to demand the audit trail. Then I wrote a statement for myself. 1 page, no emotion, about when I created the risk entry, what I wrote, and who was on the distribution list. My lawyer told me the same thing twice. Don't chase files. Don't play detective. Let them produce their own records. So, instead of trying to catch them, I did the one thing that forces systems to speak. I filed a report through the company's ethics hotline. Not a public post, not a dramatic email blast, the internal channel they brag about in training slides. I wrote it the way an auditor would. I was terminated 10 days after the merger closed. HR stated in writing it was not performance-based. The company then claimed to unemployment that I violated policy. A governance risk entry I submitted regarding a vendor relationship was subsequently removed from the register. I am requesting preservation and review of relevant records, including version history, approval chain, and communications. No accusations of fraud, no character attacks. Just contradictions, dates, and the quiet question that makes executives sweat. Why would you need to delete something if there's nothing to hide? Within 2 hours, I received an automated response. Your report has been assigned to the audit committee liaison. Stared at that line for a full minute, because that wasn't HR. That wasn't some mid-level investigator closing tickets. Audit committee means board oversight. It means seriousness. It means the people with the power to freeze payments and fire executives. The next morning, outside counsel emailed my lawyer asking for an interview. Subject line, Integration, Governance Inquiry. They offered time slots. They used words like routine and clarification, but the speed gave them away. They weren't clarifying. They were triaging. My lawyer joined the call. 2 attorneys introduced themselves, one outside, one internal. They started gentle. What was your role? Who did you report to? How did the risk register work? Who could edit it? Then they turned the corner. Why did you escalate that vendor contract? The outside counsel asked. I kept my tone flat. I described the contract. Transformation support, vague scope, fast approval. I described the relationship, publicly discoverable, common, governance risk after mergers. I described my action, logged it neutrally, sent it to governance distribution. Did you retain any company documents? The internal counsel asked. No, I said, I didn't need to. Your systems contain the evidence. That was when the internal counsel stopped pretending. He said, We want to resolve your separation amicably. My lawyer didn't miss a beat. Before we discuss separation, he said, we need clarity on why the company told HR it wasn't performance-based, then told the state it was misconduct. Silence. A long one. Then outside counsel said, there may have been miscommunication. 2 hours after that call, Barbara texted me. They froze the vendor payments, Payment freezes after close are rare. They slow integration. They irritate executives. Companies don't do that unless someone senior ordered it, which meant my hotline report didn't just land, it exploded. That afternoon, I got another message from Helen, one of my old teammates. She sent a screenshot of an internal org update. A new role had been posted. Procurement Transformation Lead. Different title? Same responsibilities. Same reporting line I used to support. Posted the day after I was terminated. So much for position eliminated. 3 days later, my lawyer got a revised separation agreement. It was different from the packet they slid across the table in that glass room. Not in tone. In truth. The new draft stated my separation was due to integration restructuring and position elimination. It explicitly stated there was no finding of misconduct. It included a neutral reference statement and a commitment that the company would not characterize my separation as for cause to third parties. And it paid what should have been paid without a fight. My deferred merger incentive plus enhanced severance. $195,000 in total value, once everything was accounted for, plus my attorney's fees. The company didn't do that because it suddenly respected me. They did it because the board's audit committee now had a verified timeline showing contradictions that don't stay small. I signed the revised agreement, not because I wanted silence, but because it corrected the only thing I truly needed corrected. My name. After that, the remaining pieces fell quietly. The consulting firm's contract was terminated for convenience. Outstanding invoices were frozen and disputed. Aaron Hoffman was removed from integration oversight pending review. His name didn't show up in headlines, but inside the building, everyone knew. When audit pulls someone out of the driver's seat right after close, it's containment. The most satisfying moment happened in my inbox. An employment verification email confirming the company would report my separation as position eliminated due to restructuring with no misconduct notation. Clean, final, written. A week later, Luis texted one last time. Your risk entry is locked, visible to audit. Version history preserved. The thing they tried to erase was now the one thing they couldn't touch. A month after the dust settled, a recruiter reached out from a competitor. He asked about integration experience. When he offered me the role, he said something simple. We don't need someone who never makes noise. We need someone who knows what noise is worth making. I accepted. On my first day at the new company, Linda drove me to work. Her latest scans had come back clear. Remission. As I got out of the car, she squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, she said, not just for fighting smart. I sat at a clean desk, opened a new laptop, and felt something I hadn't felt in months, quiet confidence. The old company had tried to turn me into a convenient story, a policy violator, a misfit, collateral damage. They tried to move fast enough that the truth wouldn't catch up. But the truth did what it always does in corporate systems. It left footprints. They terminated me 10 days after a $1.8 billion merger closed. They thought speed would protect them. Instead, speed created a timeline. A timeline created a record. And the record forced consequences. I didn't win by shouting. I won by staying clean, writing things down, asking for things in writing, refusing to sign away reality while I was still in shock. When it was over, I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a man who got his life back with his name intact, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing they could delete my access. They could delete a row in a spreadsheet, but they couldn't delete the fact that I had raised my hand. And someone with power finally had to look at what was underneath. Sometimes the system works exactly the way it's supposed to, but only when someone forces it to choose between protecting the truth or protecting the lie. The real victory isn't beating the corruption, it's proving that integrity still has market value, even when the market tries to convince you otherwise.